The broadcast of The Romans Part 1 on January 16, 1965 established another milestone for Doctor Who, as it rose to a new peak of 7th place amongst all programmes airing that week, with The Slave Traders reaching highs of 13 million viewers and Conspiracy reaching the lowest of the serial with still an impressive 10 million. The idea of setting a Doctor Who story in ancient Rome had been under consideration at least as early as the spring of 1964. On April 14th, a document was issued which outlined possible adventures should Doctor Who proceed to a second recording block. The penultimate serial to consist of 4 episodes, which described as Past and Roman. On August 31st, Dennis Spooner was commissioned to write The Romans, though it's unclear whether this was spawned from the production team's earlier plans or was Spooner's own creation. By this point in time, Spooner, having recently completed The Reign of Terror, had been appointed the successor to David Whittaker as Doctor Who's story editor, although this post would not officially change hands until October 31st. With a new companion Vicky being introduced in David Whittaker's The Rescue, it was agreed that The Romans should follow it into production so that Spooner could help define the character. Now that Doctor Who was very well established, producer Verity Lambert was keen to test the boundaries of its format. Aware of Spooner's humorous tendencies, she suggested that The Romans might be an appropriate venue to attempt a comedic Doctor Who story. The original idea was to spoof the 1951 film Quo Vadis, in which a Roman commander's love for a Christian woman brought him into conflict with Emperor Nero. Spooner soon modified his approach after discovering that Carry On Cleo, the latest entry in the Carry On film franchise, which would be in theatres shortly before The Romans started airing on television, was also being designed as a Quo Vadis parody. Nonetheless, he retained the idea of setting his scripts at the time of the Great Fire of Rome. Whereas previous Doctor Who historical adventures had paid often scrupulous attention to an accurate portrayal of events, Spooner eschewed this approach in favour of embracing popular myth. The real Inferno burned over 9 days in July of the year 64 AD. It left 10 of Rome's 14 districts partially or completely destroyed. Amongst the structures which fell to the blaze was Nero's palace, the Domus Transistoria. According to the historian Tacitus, Nero was in Antium when the fire broke out, and blamed the disaster on the widely persecuted Christian sect. However, it was popularly rumoured that Nero had engaged the Holocaust in order to rebuild Rome to his own design. In particular, he soon embarked on the construction of a mammoth new palace, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. The legend of Nero fiddling while Rome burned appeared in no historical account, although both Tacitus and Suetonius reported stories of the Caesars singing during the conflagration. Spooner also drew liberally from true history to inspire his characters. In addition to Nero and his wife Poppaea, Locusta did allegedly help Nero poison some of his enemies, including his adoptive father Emperor Claudius and his stepbrother Britannicus. Her position as court poisoner, on the other hand, was invented for the serial. Tigellinus, the ill-fated cupbearer, drew his name from the commander of Nero's imperial bodyguard. Tigellinus's character was a late addition to Spooner's script. Originally, the Doctor saved Nero from being poisoned by accidentally knocking over the Caesar's goblet. A late revision was to the end of the scene in which the school teachers were kidnapped, making it not Sevcheria but Barbara who knocked Ian unconscious. It was originally thought that Richard Martin, who had recently directed the Dalek invasion of Earth, would handle the Romans. However, by October, it was agreed that The Rescue and the Romans would be handled by the same production team, so they could essentially be made as a 6-part serial. As such, the director's job went to Christopher Barry, who was also handling The Rescue. Cast as Nero was Carry On regular Derek Francis, a friend of Jacqueline Hill's for whom a Doctor Who role had been sought since the programme's earliest days. Spooner was surprised by the choice. Nero was only 26 by the time of the Great Fire, whereas Francis would be 41 by the time the Romans entered production. The Roman Empire was certainly innovative, and Rome had become one of the most developed cities in the world, and the first city in the Eastern world to reach a population of 1 million people. Work on the serial began at the BBC Television Film Studios in Ealing, London, where model shots and the burning map of Rome were filmed on November 17th and 18th. Episode 1, The Slave Traders, was then recorded in Riverside Studio 1. All 4 parts would be housed on December 18th. Cast and crew then enjoyed a week off for Christmas. The second instalment, All Roads Lead to Rome, was taped on January 1st, 1965. Barry was unhappy with Nero's introductory scene, and during the next week there was discussion of remounting it while making Conspiracy on the 8th. However, this does not appear to have occurred. Production wrapped with the final episode, Inferno, on January 15th. The fight arranger Peter Diamond was experienced enough to choreograph the fight scenes in a short period. The fights were done with very little editing, as cuts were expensive in the 1960s. Unusually, no story editor was named on screen during The Romans. This was done to avoid giving Spooner a dual credit. The Romans was also the final serial for which Mervyn Pinfield would be listed as associate producer, although he had largely ceased his involvement with Doctor Who as of the Dalek invasion of Earth at the end of the first recording block in October. Pinfield formally stepped down on January the 11th. With Doctor Who now earning consistently high ratings, Verity Lambert was informed on January 11th that the second recording block was to be extended from 26 episodes to 35. Furthermore, a third production block was already being guaranteed. The final 5 episodes of the second block would be held over to start Doctor Who's third season in September. With the TARDIS stuck at the bottom of a cliff, the First Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky have installed themselves in an unoccupied Roman villa. As the Doctor and Ian recline, Barbara and Vicky walk to a nearby Roman village. They are spotted by 2 slave traders, Didius and Sevcheria. When they return to the villa, the Doctor announces that he is off to Rome, some miles away, and will travel there with Vicky. Later that evening, Barbara and Ian, now alone, are relaxing when the 2 slavers burst in upon them. They are overpowered and taken prisoner. Ian is sold to one slave owner, while Barbara is to be traded with another and sent to Rome. The Doctor and Vicky are en route for Rome when they find the murdered body of a lyre player named Maximus Petullian. The Doctor is holding the man's lyre when a centurion arrives and mistakes him for the dead man who is late for an engagement in Rome. The centurion accompanies them to Assisium. Once there, the centurion contacts the assassin Ascaris who killed the real Petullian and instructs him to kill the Doctor. The Doctor overpowers the assassin and drives him away. The centurion has fled and the Doctor concludes that the soldier was in league with the assassin. He decides to maintain his alias as Petullian and head to Rome. Barbara is already there and sold to Tavius, who is highly placed in the court of the Emperor Nero. She is to be a handmaiden to Nero's second wife, the Empress Poppaea Sabina. Ian has been confined to a galley in the Mediterranean, but the craft runs into rough seas and is broken up. He is washed upon the nearby shore and found by another survivor of the galley, Delos. They agree to head for Rome in search of Barbara, and when they arrive they are captured by centurions and taken to the arena to be trained as gladiators. Nero organises a banquet in honour of the musician, at which the Doctor must play the lyre. He also takes a shine to Barbara, much to the anger of Poppaea, who decides to have her poisoned at the Petullian banquet. However, Vicky switches the poison goblet. Barbara has just left the banquet chamber when the Doctor arrives, warning Nero that his wine is poisoned. The Doctor picks up his lyre with the warning that only those with the most sensitive and perceptive hearing will be able to discern its subtle melody. He then creates absolutely no sound, but none wish to make themselves out to be Philistines by not appreciating the music. Nero is not convinced, and decides to have the Doctor fed to the lions. Compared to other historicals of the era, the Romans is certainly more comedic compared to the likes of Marco Polo and the Aztecs. The scenes in Nero's court are definitely played for laughs, and the whole of episode 3 is a farce comedy, whereas Ian and Barbara have a pretty dark storyline, as they are sold into slavery and must fight in arenas. However, the great thing about the Romans is that these tones don't so much as clash, but rather complement each other. William Hartnell truly shines in this story and looks to be loving every minute of it. The First Doctor has mellowed out a lot more compared to his first season, and has moved away from being the cranky old man we originally met. It's pretty refreshing how this story picks up a month from the rescue, and we catch up with the TARDIS crew, simply having a holiday in history. It is a shame that, even though it's a show about time travel, Doctor Who rarely touches upon this idea. Every scene he's in, the Doctor lights up the scenery with his comedic timing. But definitely don't mess with the Doctor in a fight.
Oh, so you want to fight?
Now, I can get people finding this too comedic, but this scene always brings a smile to my face. His interplay with Nero is really good as well. They play it almost as if they are 2 bachelors having an entire playground, or in this case an imperial court, to themselves.
Maximus, go away! Oh, I'm so sorry, madam. I wanted to work with Nero, but I'll come back later. He seems to be rather busy.
Also, fun fact, the sauna scene is the first time we see the Doctor with no shirt on. Whilst the Doctor doesn't really move the plot forward or anything, he's more or less an observer and just taking in how bizarre this entire situation is, as he does know not to interfere with history. However, the tension is still there, as the Doctor must play for the Emperor or die. But once again, we can find humour in the fact that the Doctor is prepared to escape when the time is right, and Nero is planning to feed him to the lions when the time is right as well. It's a nice sense of dramatic irony for the pair of them. It's an interesting twist, however, that the Doctor is the one who gives Nero the idea to burn down Rome, though unwittingly. I love how he only seems to share with the audience how happy he is that he made history occur, and I love how he won't hear Ian and Barbara's side of the story and just assumes they've been lazing about all this time. This is Doctor Who being played as a historical sitcom, and Hartnell's performance is such a delight. Ian and Barbara are served really well in this story, as through them we see the uglier and darker side of the Roman Empire. Their first scenes in the villa are positively adorable, I think. Barbara doing Ian's hair and pretending to be a Roman.
Lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise it.
Oh boy, that was a mistake.
And then winding him up about the fridge.
No ice, I'm afraid.
Well, there's some in the fridge.
Ah. Very funny, very funny.
Things quickly turn ugly as they are both sold into slavery, with Ian forced to row in a ship and Barbara becoming a handmaiden. The tension doesn't disappear, however, because of the comedic scenes, as time is still against them both. They realise eventually the Doctor and Vicky will come back to the villa, but they wonder how long they would wait for them before leaving in the TARDIS. It still makes stories set in history have tension for the characters, rather than sometimes the events of the plot that go on around them. Ian's scenes of rowing amongst the slaves are pretty brutal and captures well how rotten the Romans are. When he's told how repetitive this work is and that the other prisoners have got used to it by now, it just adds to the world building. His friendship with Delos, played by Peter Diamond, is really good, and they have a great partnership, and there's legitimate tension when they fight each other, as they're forced to for each other's survival, and you want to see them both survive. Now, Barbara in this story spends most of it being chased around by Nero in a Me Too incident waiting to happen, but it's played almost like a scene from a Carry On film. I can see why it is played for laughs, as the Emperor of Rome would probably do things far worse to women of the court, but this is a family show. I do love how Jacqueline Hill just takes it all in her stride and gives a really good performance trying to survive this world of madness. Whilst in the Aztecs she was mistaken for a god and was lapping up the life of luxury, Barbara is put through some of her lowest points in this serial, but through Tavius she is given hope again and realises that not all of the Roman court is ugly. I love how both of them get back not knowing what each of the pair got up to, and I even love how the fridge gag comes back and being blamed for hitting Ian on the head accidentally. Ian and Barbara are on top form in this story, and they definitely cemented themselves as one of the series' best companions from the 60s. Now this is Vicky's first travel in the TARDIS, and this is a really good story for her. She starts the story being bored that nothing has happened yet after being in Rome for about a month, but she definitely gets more than she bargained for. And it makes sense for her to be paired with the Doctor in the majority of this story, because, like him, they're both aliens who don't like staying in one place for too long. Compare that to Ian and Barbara, who decide to stay in the villa because they are from a specific time period where they had lives and jobs of their own. I love Vicky's giddiness of being able to see Nero. She's like a kid at Disneyland. But even then, Spooner cleverly shows Vicky's inexperience as a time traveller when she nearly changes history and poisons Nero because his attitude is a bit unfair. Vicky simply wants to travel the universe and time because it's fun, and this story exemplifies those characteristics in full. Emperor Nero was 17 when he ascended the throne and was surrounded by many domineering people in his court, which led to the popular theory that luxury and decadence undermined Roman morality and authority. Nero had been portrayed on the big screen before by Charles Laughton in The Sign of the Cross, and then by Peter Ustinov on Quo Vadis. Francis plays Nero as a loud, decadent character, almost like a Roman Benny Hill character, and probably owes a lot to Peter Ustinov's portrayal of the Emperor as a mad but camp tyrant who surrounded himself in luxury, almost symptomatic of 1950 consumerism in American culture. However, there is certainly a juxtaposition with a darker side that deals with court conspiracies and poisonings, but once again it is contrasted very well with comedy. For example, Nero lets his slave test the drink after being warned by the doctor that it's poisoned, and the slave dies, but rather than go into a rage, Nero just shrugs it off, as if this is everyday life for him. Furthermore, he's like an innocent child when Poppaea catches him with Barbara, playing the innocent and insisting it was Barbara who was chasing him. We also get more of his ruthless side when he stabs the guard for not fighting hard enough, so the tension isn't lost at all. It's a perfect balance of making Nero funny, but also realising how dangerous the Imperial Court is, and how on the flick of a candle the Emperor could turn insane and feed the Doctor to the lions. His final scene is perfect, laughing like a lunatic whilst playing the lyre as the city erupts into an inferno. Kay Patrick plays Poppaea, the second wife of Nero, and Patrick even joked that she could have two cheetahs as pets like the character did in the film Quo Vadis. However, the real story of Poppaea is one of ambition, ruthlessness and horror. She represented another domineering female figure in the Imperial Court, as it's been theorised by historians that she had Nero's first wife, Octavia, executed. She plays the role very well as a figure of authority and someone desperate to hold on to her power and will poison anyone who tries to come between her and Nero, and it is played for laughs as well.
Dearest, you were on your way to see Max.
But then immediately after that scene, she warns Barbara to remember her position. With Nero being an insane and spoilt child, Poppaea does represent how the rule of the Empire is carried out with brutality. Now, the real Poppaea's story is one that's very tragic. A year after the events of the Romans, Poppaea was kicked to death by Nero whilst pregnant. I'm not making that up. Michael Peake plays Tavius and is revealed to be a secret Christian. I really like this as it adds another dimension to his character. You ask yourself, why is Tavius, a high-paid senator, so nice to Barbara? Christianity at this point mainly existed in slaves who dreamt of a better afterlife and used faith to keep their miserable and decadent lives going, and you can see why he would help her, as he has faith in heaven if he is benevolent to others and offers a glimmer of hope in a court filled with decadence and depravity. Tavius also recognises Barbara's kindness, and that's why he wants to help her as well. You don't know what to make of him at the start, as he wants to help Barbara, but he won't guarantee her freedom as he has to buy her to cover his own tracks. But he recognises Barbara's kindness, similar to what Jesus taught humanity about loving thy neighbour. Not to mention though, again, there is still funny moments with him. I love the running gag of Tavius whispering "psst" to the Doctor, and the Doctor mistaking that for a hissing trait. Again, I think it's pretty funny. I love his final scene when he looks on and holds his cross. It allows the visuals to tell the story, and that Tavius will always hold onto his faith. In terms of historical accuracy, it is for the most part on screen, and you can tell Dennis Spooner did his research. He isn't afraid to educate his audience on the brutality of Rome, slave trading, women being lusted after, being thrown into the arena to fight for your life, court conspiracies and poison. However, as a comedic historical farce, it does work pretty well. How the Doctor keeps missing Ian and Barbara and never has to experience their hardships. For example, the Doctor and Vicky are escorted to Rome and treated like royalty, and Ian and Barbara get there the long way round, by shipwreck and slave trade. It's no wonder that the second episode is called All Roads Lead to Rome, and other details I do like in this story is the clever juxtaposition of the TARDIS falling off the cliff at the start, and cutting to Ian supposedly knocked out, when in fact he's just relaxing in a villa having a nice holiday. It more or less states what sort of story we're in for. Production-wise, this story is top-notch, as I always felt that classic Doctor Who did history better than the future. The sets look fantastic and rarely wobble, and yeah, it is the same corridor the characters are running up and down, but it is hidden through the use of inventive camera angles. The fight choreography is energetic and pretty impressive for a 60s TV show, though if I have criticism, I think the sinking of the ship looks a bit rushed, as it literally looks like the stagehands are throwing water on the set. The costumes all look terrific, and the great thing about this story is that the scale of it is never lost. We go from a villa, to a market, to a ship, a beach, and eventually Nero's palace. For a 4-part story, the pacing is really good, as the plot is constantly moving with a change of location, and each episode's title is appropriately named. The Slave Traders sets up where the TARDIS crew are in this story and splits them up brilliantly. Episode 2 is a travel episode, and by the end, all the characters end up in Rome one way or another. Episode 3 is a political farce with a conspiracy thrown in, and Episode 4 culminates in the Inferno of Rome. I could easily watch the Romans in one sitting and never be bored by it. From a script standpoint, there's little fault I can find in the Romans. However, if you're not a fan of pure historicals, then I can perfectly understand some people not liking it. I first saw the Romans when I was 13 and liked it well enough, but over time it has become one of my favourite Hartnell stories, and whilst I do prefer historicals like The Massacre and The Aztecs as they have more of a serious tone, I can certainly recommend the Romans for being a comedic highlight of the Hartnell era. Heck, it wouldn't surprise me if Douglas Adams was influenced by the writing of Dennis Spooner, as the dialogue and jokes are witty enough to be on his style of comedy. To conclude, The Romans is a witty, entertaining and very well realised historical. Hartnell is on top form, as are the rest of the TARDIS crew. The mixture of comedy and tragedy is played very well and never clashes inappropriately or feels like a tonal issue. The performances are funny and play the comedy really well without going over the top, and I would highly recommend this story to anyone who wants to get into 60s Doctor Who. Doctor Who and comedy can be very tricky to do convincingly on screen, but this story succeeds with flying colours, and would highly recommend watching this story on the how-tos of making a comedy. If you're asking, what have the Romans ever done for us? they at least gave us an excellent slice of 60s Doctor Who.
Ha ha! Ho ho!